it was essentially this thing of the rest of the world is gone, and Monona was the last bastion of civilization. And so, as a weary traveler, you found your way here, and things like hotels are listed under shelter, and food, restaurants listed as food, retail is listed as resources. So, trying to be a little bit different about it. I list on here that we are considering kind of bandying about the idea of doing one as a comic book for this year. I feel like I have to kind of one up it, what I did this last year. So again, trying to be tongue in cheek, but essentially the goal is to make it stand out a little bit and give somebody a little more pause when they pick that up to read that. So I put in the request for $2,500, knowing that obviously with 22 based on the numbers, the hotel tax dollars that are available from 2020 being somewhat limited. $2,500 is, I cannot do the guide for $2,500, but understanding the situation that we're in, that everybody's kind of doing belt tightening when it comes to this, and trying to be as frugal as possible. So I went in for what I believe is the bare minimum. This past year, the guide ran me about $7,000. So I'm definitely gonna have to find a way to make up that additional money, but I think it is possible. So that is it in a nutshell.
Are there questions for Mr. Renner?
I was going to start with first, can you give us an updated balance, Brian, on what we're working with?
Yeah, so if you recall at the beginning of August, our balance was like 50,716, something like that. We then approved $5,000 for MESBA for the Chili Fest. So it leaves us with a current running balance of 45,716.
Okay, great.
Could I ask the overall budget for the guide? You're asking for 25. What do you think the overall cost is going to be to MESBA?
I think I can get it down from what we did this past year, just because the company that we worked with, there were a lot of issues with that, and they were not quite as equipped to handle that. So we ended up having to pay for the same real estate twice in some instances. But I believe I can get it down to between $5,000 and $6,000.
Okay, thanks.
And do you have a projected like advertising sales target?
So this past year, we ended up making about $5,500 from ad sales. So it wasn't a huge amount, but of course, a lot of businesses were still sort of in that recovery mode. We also significantly reduced the price on previous years from advertising for that same reason. So that was a drastic reduction in terms of price availability, or in terms of pricing, as it were. And so that plus, less advertisers, which it wasn't a huge drop in the number, but in terms of how much money they were each spending, size, of course, the bigger the ad, the more money it cost. So most of them were doing smaller ads and doing them for obviously less money because we reduced the price. So that played into it as well. And then we printed less than had been done in previous years, again, for the same reason, just to kind of reduce the cost. So we printed 10,000. We did 8,000 that was a direct mail. So basically everyone within the Monona zip codes, 1-6, and then I believe we did 1-3 and 1-4. It's just kind of the surrounding areas. And then we did 2,000 that were split between area hotels, local travel guides, places like Destination Madison, and then some of the welcome centers and things like that on the borders, on the highways. So we shipped those out there. So spreading those out, that additional 2,000.
And I know you and I talked a little about like how you like, I know I got one at my home, and so I was curious about that because typically tourism marketing, people in this area don't see it happening because it's happening like in Chicago or Milwaukee or Minneapolis or Iowa. Are you gonna stick with that same distribution plan of sending it to residents here? Or do you think you'll target those other markets to try to get people to stay in the hotels?
In general, to be sure, we did send those to area travel guides or travel agencies in some of those other markets, like Chicago and things like that. This was an experiment with how people would respond to that, and all the feedback that I got from people was good. That people, those who commented and those who reached out, I didn't get any negative comments on it in terms of why am I getting this, or this doesn't serve any purpose, and I recycled it immediately, kind of thing. So it had a lot of information about events in the city, and just again, different businesses. All the businesses in town are listed in there, and then other businesses can run ads and things like that. So even from a local standpoint, I think it still has value to the residents. I would like to be able to do more as far as getting that in the hands of potential outside travelers. But I think until we develop more inroad traffic into the Discover Monona website, where people can, send us requests for information and say, hey, I'm thinking about coming to visit there, or I'm thinking about coming to move there. Can you send me some information? Otherwise, it's really just setting it to area welcome centers and travel agencies. But travel agencies as a business model is certainly struggling. So much of that is done digitally, and so finding ways to sort of connect potential travelers to the guide online is probably where the bigger ROI is when it comes to that.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was to say, I do know that, I understand that dilemma, but it is, the main goal for these room tax dollars are to put people in the hotels. And so I did struggle a little bit, like thinking that it was mainly sent to Monona and 53713, 53716, 53714, because none of us are, well, maybe we would if we need a vacation from our kids, stay in a hotel.
Sure.
And so just a word of caution on that, just knowing that the hotels, that this is their funds, and that's why they want to see this work out there, is they want to see it going outside of the community versus staying in. So.
No, and I do completely understand that. And again, this was, sending it to the residents. I know that hadn't been done in the past. Obviously, making it available to residents and doing things like putting it in the magazine rack in City Hall and places like that where people have access to it had been kind of the general approach in the past. I have kind of a larger goal of getting area residents to essentially be brand ambassadors for the town, and so creating content that's then shareable, that people want to put out there. And obviously a guide, nobody's going to say, well, let me mail this to my sister in Alaska, but at the same time, having something that somebody looks at, chuckles at, and wants to then tell other people about, to me is certainly a useful tool. If there's a way to do both, I would be extremely happy. If it came down to, can we only send it to residents, or can we only send it out into the world? Obviously, I would choose the latter.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, and even with all our great offerings, Wisconsin's the #1 people still visit is to visit family and friends. So just getting residents to think of it as a destination could put people in hotels for visitors. But that all sounds great. I was actually curious about what it's going to look like digitally. Is it just going to be a 1-to-1, or are you going to reformat it in any way to make it a little more friendly to share?
So the version that we did last was the 1-to-1, and it was the kind of thing where you can, essentially turn the pages with your mouse. I would like that to be a little more intuitive for the next time, but again, that was something with the designer that we worked with. We just had a number of challenges that kind of came up. They were had not had as much experience in doing guides as they had kind of sold us on initially.
Sure.
It's an editing feast. I will say that, having having done it for 5 years, it's an editing beast. There's a lot of details in there for sure. So sorry that you went through that.
Any further questions? And Brian, just a point of information, I guess, before we entertain a motion on this. You just gave us the balance. When is our next scheduled review of applications? When would we be doing that?
I guess it would be dependent on if we were to receive any new applications. Now that the quote unquote fall funding cycle has closed. So these 2 applications are the ones that we're reviewing now. It's not to say I couldn't get an email or a phone call from an organization that's got an event or something that has a tourism related angle to it in December or January or whatever. And so if I were to get those applications in at some point, or at least questions about submitting an application, then I would probably call to have a tourism commission meeting to have you guys take a look at and decide if you wanted to fund that new activity, as it were. Yeah,
I think with Alder Goforth's question about, getting the heads in the beds, it's such an unusual time, and ironically, it may be that nearby people are more likely. I don't, with travel limited and fewer, big events going on. Those staycations seem popular too. So anyway, that's a little bit of a non sequitur, but I think it'd be worthwhile. Is there a motion to approve this application unless there are further questions?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? I guess I will offer, again, picking up on Alder Goforth's questions, I think encouraging you, Devin, just to think about making that connection, helping us make that connection. We're learning as a commission how to best utilize these funds. So making the connection to those heads in the beds as much as possible for us would be great. But I think this is worthwhile. So without further, unless there's further discussion, I'll call for votes. And all those in favor of approving the application?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Moving on to oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. The second application is in your packet materials. That one is the biannual lake loop map.
All right. Seems like a somewhat similar application, but maybe we'll turn it over, just a different content, but a similar approach. So Devin, why don't you go ahead?
This is for the bike loop map. So this is something that's done every other year. We did not do one for this year. In 20, I had the project had kind of already started, and I inherited it. And it's something that I think the city certainly supports, especially with now with the work that's going to be done on Winnequa, in terms of just kind of promoting that as the lake loop and the area businesses that are close to that. As cyclists, joggers, people come through the area, having that as a marketing tool. As far as it goes for me, and selling the ads there, it's not a moneymaker. This for 2020, I think I made about $500 on it. So it's something that I'm happy to do to take off the city's plate. That certainly falls under kind of the tourism purview, and continue that. But with the amount of time that it takes to do it, and the selling of ads, and the working with designers and getting everything done, it's definitely one where it would help to have the additional funds come in for it. The $2,500 is pretty on par for what the budget looks like. So again, this is not a moneymaker for us. $2,500 is roughly what it cost. So I had mentioned in the application that I thought to kind of tie in a social media campaign. Because I sort of inherited it last time, and the project had already started, I didn't get a chance to really weigh in on much of the design or sort of the ideas behind it. So for this one, I did have thoughts on if you all are familiar with the treasure that's supposed to be buried somewhere in Milwaukee at some of the different monuments, and there's these riddles out there. And while I don't know if I have a treasure in my budget, doing something, gift cards or some sort of bigger prize, TV, I don't know, something along those lines, and tying it in that way so that people actually go out and pick up the map and look for that. I think might be a good way to kind of shine a spotlight on that, shine a spotlight on Monona, get more people to come in. So that is just an idea at this point. I have not completely flushed that out, but that was just something I was kind of kicking around.
All right. Questions on the application?
How many copies are you planning on doing?
I think this last time we did 3,000.
And then do you
I
have,
think.
I was wondering about your timeline and if it would be possible to insert it in the guide to help yourself with distribution, and save on your
Yeah,
mail
we
costs.
probably could. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then the other thing with timeline is, I was gonna say, tune into the November 1st meeting, because it's almost like, if we approve Winnebago Road reconstruction, that'll be reconstructed all next summer. And I don't know if the timing could be a little, you're gonna want some kind of verbiage on the map, letting people know alternative routes or something.
Sure.
Yeah.
Could I ask what kind of feedback there was on the last Lake Loop map from businesses?
Very little. I mean, certainly from the advertisers and the businesses, there was a lot of commentary in terms of area residents. I really didn't get any. But the area businesses, the ones that were that we tried to highlight on the map, and the ones that were featured, the ones that ran ads, they all seemed fairly happy with it.
So it says here a copy goes to Destination Madison. Do they not have a Lake Loop map?
They don't.
Yeah, I don't believe so. No.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah, they should. And go, Devin.
Other questions? All right.
Oh, I was gonna say, make sure that you update the B-cycle locations. I'm sure you're
Yes.
already thinking about that. So I know they've changed, they've added several on the east side, so.
Yeah.
All right. I'd entertain a motion to approve the application.
Oh, a move to approve the application.
I'll second, we'll take turns.
Thank you both. Any further discussion? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That part's easy today, so tell me.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
So, moving on to 5B, renewal of tourism entity agreement, which is in our packet, correct?
Yeah, and thank you. This is an item that we do every couple of years. We have a tourism entity agreement with NESBA under kind of a statutory requirement to have an organization serve as your tourism entity. We, for the last number of years, have chosen NESBA to be that entity. So this is kind of that standard agreement. How it works is we adopt it for 1 year. So for example, 2022, and then there's an automatic extension for another year, which would cover 2023. So if you were to adopt this today, we would be covered until December of 2023, and then in fall of 23, bring back this document for approval again at that point.
Just a question, Brian, is it the reason you said it's 2 years, but it's an automatic renewal after 1? What's the reason for that approach as opposed to just straight 2 years?
I don't know. This was written prior to my time here, so I don't know what the reasoning was behind that. If you wanted to strike it, make it an automatic 2 years, I'm fine with that. There's no harm in that.
No, I'm just curious. I guess I think would interpret that to mean maybe that's easy. It's easier to cancel it after 1 year. It's an automatic renewal unless, and it's just maybe easier if something goes wrong to bail out. I don't know. It's not that consequential. Are there questions on this? All right.
I was gonna ask one, I'm trying to think of where it was. It says that annually you give an annual accounting Oh yeah, annual accounting number 6. Before March 1st. Okay, I was just wondering how that has gone. Would it be easier to do that 6-month periods, or has annual been working well?
Annual, I think is fine, but it might be nice to change that to make it coincide with a meeting like this, for example.
Yeah,
When we know we're gonna have a tourism commission meeting in, August or October, somewhere in that time frame. So I think if we were comfortable changing that on or before, we'll call it November 1, because we would typically meet probably August and for sure at some point in October, like we're doing right now. So if you want to say on or before November 1, that would give us the opportunity to make that, have Devin or whomever make that report while we're already planning on meeting.
Yeah.
Devin, do you have any concerns about that?
None. No, I'm happy to do it.
Thank you. And do you think, I'm curious, if we meet in October, is there a reason you're setting it at November and we wouldn't say maybe October 1 so that it would be ready for the October meeting? Or
Oh yeah, you could do that. Yeah.
yeah, that might be a good
Okay.
approach. In case we get a lot of applications too, and then,
yeah.
because I think that October meeting went pretty quickly.
Okay, I can change that to October 1. That's fine.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. And again, Devin, just making sure, because you guys are signatory to, any concerns with that?
No.
All right. All right, I would take a motion to approve the tourism entity agreement.
Ping pong back to me. I'll move to approve.
Second.
Thank
We
you.
got our flow down here.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, moving on to 6 items for future agenda. And Brian, we would typically meet when next, unless we get some applications or you see some other reason to call us.
Yeah, so we talked at the last meeting about potentially meeting, depending on when events were to happen. So for example, if we got a time-specific event like a festival that was happening in June, just to take a month, we would then possibly meet in July or August after that event had occurred, so that entity could provide an update on how the funds were spent. Since the only 2 applications we have presently are more static in terms of timing, we could meet at some point mid next year once Devin has completed the Lake Loop map and the guide, just to get a sense of how the marketing of that went. So that date could to be determined once he's got both those work products done. So as of now, we'll see mid-year depending on his schedule for those 2 items.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I missed it, Devin, but what is your rough time frame on either or both of these?
Well, Alder Goforth's point about the road construction was not something I'd considered in regards to the Lake Loop map, so that may change that. But typically, as far as the guide goes, looking at kind of late spring, early summer, when you really start to get that tourism season. So if we do the guide to coincide with that, it would be at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, so we're probably talking about a June-ish or July-ish date, huh?
Probably May to June, I would think.
Yeah, and then we would meet after that to hopefully hear from you on how it went.
Yep.
Just to let other members of the commission know, when we're thinking about agenda items, that's our likely next date for that.
Just so you know, for the future, we're looking probably, I'll know next year, right around second week of February where we're at. Just based on projections right now, we'll probably, adding what we haven't spent this year, we'll probably be over 100,000 we're looking at. So we're at least a good 60,000 at the 40. So I think we're right around there. And just another FYI, when we talk about hotels, actually it's split almost 50-50 between Airbnb and hotels as far as room tax. So I don't know if that's a different way to look at things, but the Airbnbs is big right now in Monona. So
A resident having a guide at their home might be helpful.
yes. So
Yeah, for sure. I was gonna ask, but I know that kind of maybe as on the item 6, trying to stay on agenda. Have we gotten a report, like how many Airbnbs there are in town, or is that a tough thing to compile?
they don't tell us how many it is. So
Okay, you
like
just get
Airbnb,
it.
the website, there's 3 different expedients. The expedient will send us what their gross revenues are, and then what the share that comes to us is.
Could we see that report?
Yeah, I mean, it's
I think that'd be kind of cool
It's
to
just
look
a
at
one-
for the next meeting, maybe.
just a one-page report. Each of
Yeah.
them send us in that says gross less government, which is non taxable, and then what's your share.
Yeah, that'd be
Would just the
interesting.
amount indicate like even how many just stays at all?
It doesn't say anything like
Okay,
that.
got
It's
it.
just money.
It's just, yeah.
Unfortunately,
Unfortunately, we don't audit that, and we don't.
Yeah,
So I don't know.
Yes, and they don't want you to, frankly, so they're not giving any information. So Mark, that 100,000 that comes in, so that that actually will come in at the end of 2022, or? is
So
it in the
I'll
first
know what it
quarter?
is. I'll know what we are. That's going to be available for 2023, I guess, budget. Or how
Yeah,
do
so
you
that
feel?
would be, that 100,000 would be what would be available for this body to.
October then.
As part of our
Oh, in
October
October.
22
Got it.
cycle for projects in 23.
Okay.
Unless something major comes. up.
Yeah.
Okay, I had a couple other things, for the future agendas. I was thinking that this is a really unusual commission for the city and that we dole out money. I mean, it's not taxpayer money, it's hotel tax money, but the public often doesn't realize that distinction. So I was thinking it might be smart of us to have like up in the first top 4 items, a standing item of disclosure of conflict of interest. In case anyone sits on a board of an applicant or is somehow involved with an applicant, just to kind of as a housekeeping piece. And I don't know if the commission wants to discuss that idea.
Well, I think we could certainly put it on agenda for discussion. I think that's a good,
Okay.
whether or not it becomes a standing item could be the discussion
Okay,
at the next meeting, because it'd be good to have all of us, or as many as possible. And I wouldn't mind talking about that either, because I'm wondering, we might need a legal review, because a lot of times conflicts of interest and how you disclose them, there's a very specific method, and whether or not, having it
Yes.
on the agenda is the best way, or if it's in writing, once a year, we have to submit something in writing or something like that. So
yeah.
anyway, good question, but it sounded like you had further. So Brian, you'll get that down to.
Yep, I'll have that as on my list of items to include for our next.
Maybe,
Come
if
on,
you
Dave.
don't mind, Alder, go for it's a friendly amendment to say the agenda item would be something like discussion on how commission members should handle potential conflict of interest. And
Yeah,
discuss that.
I accept that. Absolutely. That's a great suggestion.
Other
I
comments?
know, I was thinking when I was in Fitchburg, they just had it as a standing item and it was kind of an easy one, then you always hit it, and it was out of the way. I was wondering if for a future agenda, so, it's tough. I remember when I was running the chamber, and I think about this for Devin, it's tough to know if you're ever moving the needle. And I know it's always been challenging to get our hotels to collect that data. Like I always had, a checklist for them to ask, when they ask someone checking in, what brings you to town today? Oh, I'm here for the Monona chili cook-off. And then they check it off on a sheet. So then you have some data that, okay, people are coming in. I was wondering if we could discuss that, if the hotels are doing that. It was always a struggle to get them to do that.
Yeah, if they are, they're not telling us that they're doing
Yeah.
that. But yes, we can absolutely add that as a discussion.
And so maybe it'd be part of like us just drafting up the sheets or whatever, or coming up with something and just really trying to stay on them, encouraging them to do that. Because it's hard for Devin to know what measures are actually working without that information,
Yeah, and it's not just Devin. I mean, I think it's also, for example.
Absolutely, the parade.
The parade and
The
the
festival.
festival.
Yeah.
Those are both ones where we've asked them to provide data on kind of lodging usage.
Yeah, it can't hurt to keep trying.
Airbnb's be the one, because they're like half now, so
Yeah,
I don't know how you do that. That's
Well, and
So
go ahead, Devin.
thank you. So I found that when I asked them specifically, what was, for example, we're doing the tailgates with them right now. And so I say, okay, what did this weekend look like in regards to your bookings? They're usually pretty good at the very least with giving me percentages to say, hey, we were, 100% filled, we were 85%, whatever it was. If I said to them, can you give me a breakdown on what, third quarter looked like for you in terms of your occupancy, I would get crickets. And that has been my experience with them in the past. So if it, directly sort of is, if it's something that I'm involved in, and that I'm working with them on, they're usually pretty forthright. If it's not, I think they generally look at it as not your business, and they just don't tell me.
Because I think they have to do that if they're a member of Destination Madison. They are logging all of that information for because Destination Madison has a slew of data on hotel
Yeah.
stays, and that's why they pay their memberships. So
And
it's,
Destination,
it's just a matter of getting them trained up,
Sure.
to do that, and as a part of their,
Like showing them
intake.
that, and it's like, it's a partnership, like them having this data is great for them and great for us to serve their needs as well,
Yes.
because it's mutually beneficial. situation,
Absolutely.
so.
And it will only help us serve them better and help them, get more
Not just homework for them.
stays. Yeah. Sorry, Deb.
and Destination Madison may be more. I've got a pretty good relationship with them. I don't know what it's like between the city and them, but I think they would be fairly inclined to share that data if I asked.
Yeah. And I think it's because they have that nice software, it's just a check of a button, and so that being the difference maybe. So yeah, that sounds like a great approach.
Any other future agenda items? I like that agenda item as well. And I think this question of how, I think we as commission members, and you asked the question earlier, Alder Goforth, about, how do we know if this is working kinds of questions, and that partnership idea that, hey, we want to spend this money in a way that's going to be most effective. Help us figure out what that is. And, Devin, to the extent you can help us with that, understanding what's happening out there and what's working and what's not, or strategies to find out what's working, so we can do more of that and try to invest in those types of things.
Sure.
Going to drive business.
And Brian, I don't know if I'm skipping ahead on the agenda, but as part of the conversations we've been having in regards to Discover Monona, and sort of partnering with the city on that, and giving a degree of authenticity to it. So one of the challenges that I have had over the past year is we've really, in 2020, we had the tourism, we had the Discover Monona, but we really weren't doing much with it just because it's still in shutdown. But for 21, we've rolled out the social media channels, we've rolled out the new website, we've started doing events under that banner. And so one of the challenges that I've had is, there are so many different groups and different organizations that are doing different events throughout the course of the year, and there isn't a whole lot of communication. Once they sort of come to this meeting, and whether they get their money from the city, or if they're just doing it privately or their own fundraising. Beyond that, there just really isn't a whole lot of communication outside of maybe talking to Parks Department to say, hey, we're doing this event at Ahusco, we're doing it wherever. And I'll get emails from people. I actually had one this summer, and a guy said, hey, my event is on Thursday. Can you help me get a couple of sponsors? And I'm like, it's Tuesday. No, I cannot. So one of the things that I would really like to do is have something where we're kind of centralizing that in terms of us being able to help promote and share out events that are not ours. So whether it's something like the regatta, or the farmers market, or whatever it is, the Monona Festival, anything, being able to share those things out and help partner with them. Also being able to help secure sponsors in my, sort of my fourth quarter chore list. One of the things that I do is kind of go around to some of the bigger businesses and talk about their marketing goals for the coming year. And in sort of touching on some of that, that's something that they deal with a lot, because of course, a company like MG&E, TDS is going to get hit up for sponsorships all the time. So if they have something that at the beginning of the year says, hey, when it comes to Monona, at least, these are the dozen or so events that are going to be coming, what aligns with your marketing goals, what doesn't, these are some of the events they're going to be looking at. And it's just a tentative roadmap. It's not a contract by any means. It's not a hard thing. And of course, there can be exceptions. The Chili Fest being a perfect example in that we started the year, we had no idea we were going to be doing that event. So things can change, but at the very least, it gives those businesses an idea of what's coming, so they don't end up with something where they're getting 7 different organizations in a span of 3 weeks coming to them, and it's like, didn't I just talk to you? I thought we were already sponsoring this, or I thought I already said no. Like, who are you again? And it sort of becomes noise. So consolidating some of that. Kind of a central calendar and the communication, and working with the city on lending authenticity to what we're doing on the Discover Monona. Especially in regards to the social media, because I've got this page and I've got this thing set up and I'm having a good time with it and our engagement is great, but there is nothing that prevents Joe up the street from saying, I want to do my own thing and I'm gonna call this the tourism page for Monona. And so having something where I'm working with the city on that instead of just putting stuff out there.
So Devin, I want to make sure I
Sure.
get us back to our agenda.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going
That's
to the
okay.
weeds.
I don't think you were jumping ahead if what you were trying to do is get an item on an agenda for a future meeting.
Sure.
That's where we
A
are
very
now.
long way of describing it, but yes.
So, for Brian's sake and for our sake, I think what I hear you saying is some way to coordinate better with, well, how would you put it? If it was on an agenda, what would you want said?
Sure. That's probably the best way to put it, coordinating with the city on tourism promotion.
Great. Because I think that's in the commission's interest to try to facilitate that as best we can. And
Sure.
I think that's a good topic. Thank you.
Great point.
All right. Any other items for future meetings? All right. I think that's a good list. Brian, do we need to do anything else on that?
Nope, I think we're good for now.
All right. And then we already discussed number 7 a little bit. Upcoming meeting, we're thinking in the rough time frame of June, July. I think, Devin, as you get close to finalizing the Lake Loop and or the guide, being in touch with Brian, because we'd love to get a report on how that went, and we'd schedule a meeting to talk to you about that and the other items we just discussed. So roughly we'll say June, July timeframe.
I know Kelly Slack was planning on doing a parade, the Monona Parade, Memorial Day Parade.
Yeah, and I forget the follow, and I don't know that it ever came together.
Yeah, well, I think she was planning on Memorial Day.
Oh, for 2022.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I sent her stuff and she did not send
She
that.
didn't, okay. So we might see something.
Yeah, we
So
might, yeah.
I did have a chance to chat with her.
Okay.
She is, as far as like 3 weeks ago, she is still planning on doing the parade, but she had said she was not planning on asking the city for any tourism money at the very least, because people don't stay in hotels for the Memorial Day Parade. So she didn't see the she didn't feel it was fair to ask for money for it. Not to speak for her, but that was the conversation she and I had. So she may request different funds, but I don't think she was going to ask for tourism dollars. But she is still planning on doing the event.
Okay, thanks.
All right. I think we're headed toward number 8, unless there's any other items. And do we need a motion to adjourn, Brian?
Motion to adjourn? Second.
All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, I think we're good because I don't see any nays out there. So thank you, Devin. Thank you, Mark and Brian and Christy.